All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon. I hope you're having a good day. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar. I'm Carmen Boone, Education Coordinator from Oregon Pacific Area Health Education Center, and today I'll be your host and moderator. Let's go over some housekeeping items. On your GoToWebinar control panel, you will notice that all microphones are muted. They'll remain muted during this session. If you are experiencing audio difficulties, make sure your computer speaker volume is turned up or use the phone option to listen in. Slides can be downloaded from the handouts menu. Please use the questions menu for typing any question or comments at any time. Questions will be answered at the end. If we run out of time, we would answer your question via email and email you the Q&A within a week. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website. You can see our web address right there. Now, if you have any questions, please email me at carmenb@somehealth.org. Now, in order to obtain CME or CE credit for this activity, you must log into www.eeds.com and enter this activity code. Please write it down for your records. And this webinar is produced by the Oregon Pacific Area Health Education Center, a hosted agency of Samaritan Lebanon Community Hospital, and it's presented by Sara Lee Thomas. Prior to joining Samaritan, Sara led a national award-winning Healthy Heart team in Central Oregon for 15 years on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. She became the clinical nutrition manager at Good Samaritan Regional Medical Center in 2010 and continues to educate the community, students, and professional staff on nutrition in her current role. She works to increase the recognition and respect for the role of nutrition therapy by dietitians in improving patient care, costs, and outcomes. Sara Thomas and the planners of this activity report that we have no conflicts of interest or relevant financial relationships with any commercial entities that might affect the contents of this presentation. Now, without further ado, let's start the webinar, and I'll leave you with Sara.
Thank you, Carmen. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Carmen already gave an introduction. Here you can see a map of where the Warm Springs Reservation has been, and she already reviewed this as well. These are some key references if you want to read more about numeracy, health numeracy. And these are the detailed objectives for Part 1 and Part 2, with Part 1 in red. So my main focus today is to propose some innovative ways to address health literacy and numeracy issues in diabetes patients, specifically health numeracy, through the lens of using diabetes, some metaphors and ways to explain numeracy concepts and how to use that in action. So using the baseball game, using the analog clock to teach patients how to convert carb grams to carb choices and back again, a very common numeracy challenge, and also discuss the idea of a dollar store, how that can really help your patients understand portions and serving sizes and how much is allowed per meal. And also in this one and the next one, we'll be using the label because it's very important. Labels are everywhere, and when patients know how to use them, they can become instant nutritionists as far as using them in a way that they need to use them and want to use them. So I just converted that to the Sara summary, which is basically the same thing. The clock method also can be used for insulin carb ratios, because basically an analog clock is a number line. So we'll go to that. Part 2, I hope you return to learn about sugar frosting in your blood and other numbers and how to help people understand and apply those. So just first, I want to take a umbrella view. Diabetes is a very serious disease, but half is preventable and the rest is controllable. When we're talking about health literacy and numeracy, I'm sure many of you have heard of literacy and understand the importance of people understanding the words they read and the words they hear. But numeracy is just as important a concept, and it's about people have different levels of skills. The important thing to take away is we can help them improve the skills they have so that they can advance and use and act better and succeed. So these are the important numbers to pay attention to. So high literacy and high numeracy is pretty much just 1 out of 10 people that you're going to be working with has that high level of numeracy and literacy, where regardless of how the handout or how you speak about something or explain something, they'll probably be able to figure it out because they start at this high level. However, that is not the bulk of the people we're going to see. Over half have a low proficiency number. And also low numeracy is even higher than others. This affects things, and it's important because health numeracy affects how people understand their health, how they participate in decision making, and if you address it, you can improve control of their chronic disease. And numeracy is not just numbers, it's also about concepts. Is it a little, is it a lot? So it's also the words we use and how we think about it in our brain as well. So this is a classic one, and many of us sometimes don't understand this one. So this is always my favorite place to start as a dietitian. So what is the difference between a serving size and a portion size? Well, a serving size is a standard amount, or as I joke, what Sara says. Whereas a portion is whatever people put on their plate or pour into their cup. So standard serving is half a cup of orange juice. A portion could be 8 ounces, 12 ounces, or more. It's whatever a person decides to eat or drink. This is an important distinction and is a basic numeracy concept that is important to teach patients. One of my favorite ones to use is basically kind of like a ramen noodle. So there's 2 questions. So how big is the serving size? And how big is the portion size? Remember, the serving size is the standard. Believe it or not, on the nutrition facts label, the serving size is half a block. And if any of you actually cut this little block in half, I don't know, that's strange, but all of us eat the whole thing. But what we need to know, and our patients must know, is the numbers on the label are per serving, not per portion. No matter how ridiculous it might seem the serving size is. Also, to emphasize how important numeracy and visuals can be, is when you include visuals, either in your handout or visually when you're teaching a patient, they can increase their compliance or following the directions or able to do what you want them to do and they want to do by 3-fold. This makes a difference. It's not just a nice thing to do, it's a great thing to do. And when you look at, research has numerous ways to measure literacy and numeracy, but when you look at these standardized tests of what level is it, what level is required, when you put diabetes self-management in there, what are the tasks involved? What is the challenges involved? What is needed? Diabetes self-management requires the highest level of health numeracy. You have units of insulin, you have grams of carbohydrate, you have milligrams per deciliter of blood sugar, you have A1C, you have percentages, you have number of pills and milligrams and times per day. So not only is it at the highest level, it actually exceeds any example used in the education field as example. So diabetes self-management is highly demanding for numeracy skills. So addressing those numeracy needs is very essential and beneficial for diabetes patients. One important thing I want to emphasize, so I put it in yellow, is you have to remember the emotional component that numbers carry, the implied judgment of not being at a certain number or goal, and proactively address it. We all have the common example of someone getting on the scale in the morning, that number somehow, affecting how they feel for the day. Well, it can be the same thing with these numbers and these cutoffs that we give people. For instance, frequent example is people feel bad when they're put on a diabetes medication for the first time. And they feel like they were better, that they're better, their diabetes is better when they had 0 medications. Kind of not understanding the preeminence of the importance of A1C. What really matters is how sugar frosted your blood is. That's what A1C is. And diabetes type 2 itself changes over time. So people need to kind of know from the beginning, just because you need more medications, different medications, doesn't mean you failed. It just means your diabetes has changed and needs something different. So in my almost 30 years, my rule of thumb is about every 5 years, someone with diabetes type 2 is going to need more or different. And that's just the normal course of the disease. It doesn't mean someone's failed. And these are some excellent information on CDC. What I want to focus on here for the purpose of today is focusing on using familiar concepts, words, numbers, and images that in ways that make sense to the people you're talking to and need the information. So there, again, the literacy and numeracy, if we don't pay attention to them, higher costs, morbidity, mortality. If we pay attention to them, we improve our patients' chance of accomplishing what they want to do and with their health. And of course, all of this is under the teach back, teach back, teach back. That's always important. So again, what am I going to talk about? So 3 key things today besides the food label is using the metaphor of baseball to help people understand ranges, goals, expectations versus perfection. The diabetes dollar store so people can understand carb choices for meal planning, and the analog clock for carb counting, where you can use the clock to convert carb grams to carb choices and back again. So again, the label reading. Almost all foods are required to have a food label, and these are the key things to teach someone so they understand the numbers here, the numeracy, so they can take this label and use it. The label has lots of good information. It's just not very self-explanatory. So you always have someone start at the top. What is the serving size? Because all the numbers on the label go with that amount, not the whole thing. So this is like a frozen mac and cheese. Most people are going to eat the whole frozen mac and cheese. If they do, then they have to multiply everything on the label by 2 because there's 2 servings per container. So again, whether the serving size is what goes with those numbers. Now, it may be silly and people are like, that's ridiculous, but it doesn't matter. The thing people need to know is that serving size, that standard, whatever it is what goes with all the other numbers. The other thing that's very important and so easy to teach people is the daily value. What is the daily value? They just do the math for you to answer a basic question. Is it a little or is it a lot? It's very straightforward. 5, 10, 20, low, medium, or high. And it applies whether it's a, quote, good nutrient or a bad nutrient. So this 1 cup of mac and cheese is high in sodium, 20% daily value, and it's also high in calcium, 20%. So this is a high source of calcium. It's also a high source of sodium. And so this is a great example of numeracy. When people just have a little bit, it doesn't take long, and it helps people that have multiple health problems. I was precepting the intern recently, and she said, I was taught about heart disease, I talk about kidney disease, but how do you put them all together? With the label, someone can pay attention to sodium for their blood pressure, saturated fat for their cholesterol, and calcium for their bones. So let's go to that metaphor of baseball. It's very useful because what happens when people get type 2 diabetes is the patient has to start doing a lot of thinking that their body used to do for them. And the example I like to use is like, yeah, you're in college, you oversleep, you rush to class, no breakfast, your blood sugar is fine. You grab a coffee, you don't get to eat, still your blood sugar is fine. And then at night, you buy a whole pizza and eat the whole pizza. Your blood sugar is fine. Your blood sugar never went too low and never went too high because your body had the safeguards on it, the batting cage. When someone gets type 2 diabetes, all of those controls are not working correctly. So you lose the batting cage and you can get fly balls either way. And the baseball is good because no one bats 1,000. You're always going to have foul balls one way or the other. And you want to just keep playing and keep learning. And the goal is not to have them all on the ball field, it's just to have most of them. If someone has half their blood sugars in the range, that's good. If it's 80% of the time, that's excellent. And so you can use the baseball field to kind of write down. So I actually kind of draw it more, but I'm using this actual picture. So I just draw little lines for people, and whatever their goals happen to be, I'll write on the left side, what's the low cutoff, and on the right side, what's the high cutoff 2 hours after eating. And then I'll write down at the bottom, how many grams of carb per meal. So this is an example for maybe a typical adult patient. So I say, well, you have to have at least 45 grams, but no more than 75 grams per meal or per inning. So sorry, I like jokes like that. So per inning, and that's where you want it to be before and after. And then people have that idea, that concept of this is the game we're playing, this is the goal we're playing, and no one bats 1,000. I put a red star on this because this is so key. Teach patients this over and over and over again. If they're going to, quote, play the game of baseball, how do you get back on the field after a low? We often teach this, but I don't think I found that the more we emphasize it, people need to know this. So it's a 15-15 rule. So 15 grams of carbohydrate, give them a concrete example, half a cup of juice, wait 15 minutes and retest. And that's how they get back on the field. Now through this presentation, I have some slides with a little magnifying glass. These are kind of details for those who are like, what do you mean here? What exactly do you mean? What's the kind of the technical background? So I provide this for your information, but usually I'm not going to go into great detail, other than to say you can always help your patients by doing the math for them. For instance, people sometimes think, oh, half a cup of juice is not enough. I feel anxious, I'm scared, because their blood sugar is low. So when you do the math, you reveal that 15 grams of carbohydrate equals 15,000 milligrams of glucose. That seems quite enough. And then if you want to go into further math, it's there as well. One of the key things I want to take away today is, again, to bat away perfection, because perfection kills motivation. I've seen more patients in my career give up because they demanded too much perfection from themselves than those who allowed themselves to aim to play ball, basically, to keep playing, most of them on, figure out, adapt or something. But perfection leads to burnout, and it's not evidence-based. People can do well on a number of plans. There's no one diet to rule them all, and you don't have to bat 1,000 to do well. Again, over 50% on the ballpark is good, 80% is great. Another key concept that's worth repeating to patients is the idea, it's a numeracy concept, of everyday and sometimes foods. If you're going to get the benefits of vegetables, they're everyday foods. You need them every day to get the benefit, nutrient and health-wise. And there's sometimes foods, cake, candy, they're okay. It's okay to have cake and candy sometimes. They're not bad or good. It's just everyday and sometimes foods. Sometimes foods are okay to eat some or sometimes. It's an important concept because if we get to perfection thinking, we can actually induce eating disorders, disordered eating in people, and that's a harm that we would do or could possibly trigger. Likewise, carbohydrates are not bad. Too few carbohydrates are bad. You get low blood sugar. Too much carbohydrate is bad, high blood sugar. So again, this concept of like the ball field or the classic Goldilocks, you know, there's different portion sizes there for baby bear to mama bear and papa bear. Which one is right for Goldilocks? Well, they're clearly just right for baby bear, mama bear, and papa bear, but maybe she is more like baby bear. So carbohydrates are not bad. Too few are bad and too much. So again, that concept of the amount is what's key. And the amount per meal is what's most important. How much can your body handle at one time when you have diabetes? It can't handle the no eating or the whole pizza anymore. It's like it needs kind of divided out how much your body can handle at one time. And likewise, blood sugar is not bad. Too low is not good, and too high is not good. And again, we have other concepts or metaphors, the balance, balancing things on both sides. You can balance your blood sugars by balancing the total carbohydrates you eat with your exercise and medications. And of course, balance in stress and sleep is also important. And this is an old but goodie for, I like quotes. And so this is a very good one about nutrition. So nutriment is both food and poison. The dosage makes it either poison or remedy. And this certainly applies to pretty much any nutrient you can think of, but certainly carbohydrates in the setting of diabetes. This is again kind of a close-up, but this is almost all nutrients follow this U curve. They're bad if they're too low, you get deficiency, and it's bad and risky when it's too high. This applies to practically every nutrient. So you can increase your nutrient and get a decrease in your risk over on the left hand of the aisle. And then over here, you do the same increase in nutrients, and suddenly it's a bad thing. So this is a kind of a key concept in nutrition. Another way that works for some people, if they're like, I don't know baseball, what are you talking about? Sports? I don't pay attention to sports. Well, pretty much everybody drives. And so this is another useful metaphor that uses the same concept. But again, you're driving down the road. You want to stay in your lane. You don't want to go into the ditch, and you don't want to go into oncoming traffic. You don't want to go too fast, and you don't want to go too slow. So this is another metaphor that can work. And you kind of know when you're teaching someone, you get the light bulb or you get the blank stare. So these are some other alternate ways when you're like, you just get the what? Baseball? So, and this again is a background slide. So when you look at the research on carbohydrates and diabetes, the #1 priority is the amount at one time. The second priority, important, but just not #1, is the kind of carb, how fast or slow it is, and how fast or empty it is. So those are important, but they are not the main thing. The main thing is the dose of carbohydrate at one time. In fact, I actually caution you not to venture into glycemic index and load and things like that. It's very complex numeracy, and it can just frustrate a patient. Now, that's not to say it might work for somebody, but I just caution you that that is a complicated numeracy challenge that may be backfire. And here's again our background slide for examples of some common consistent carbohydrate diet limits. And again, notice there's like a minimum and a maximum, because we don't want to go too low and we don't want to go too high. And then of course, snacks can be in there as well. And for those of like, well, what about activity levels? This is a slide. This is mostly aimed at athletes, but you can see common exercise levels are in there, how much carbohydrates you need, depending on how much activity. Carbs are a major fuel. So the more fuel you need, the more carbohydrate you need. It's a pretty direct relationship there. So again, to summarize, remember the Goldilocks principle, remember the baseball. Carbohydrates are not bad. It's important to convey that. People get the idea that, oh, carbohydrates are bad. And then they get low blood sugar, they faint, car accidents. It's a risky thing to tie the label bad to things. So it's about balance, and people get that idea. So that leads us to, how do we do that? How do we convey that to patients? And this is the dollar store. When you're looking for metaphors for literacy or numeracy, you want to look for something that most people have familiarity with or can relate to. So the concept of diabetes dollars being spent in a dollar store helps teach people about the serving size and the mealtime carb counting. The key, again, is the amount of carb at one time. The benefit of tying a concept that you're teaching to something familiar is they already know something. So you're just kind of making one link, and then you have it, and they have it in their brain. So I actually use stacks of rubber bread to teach this. So here's a stack of 5 slices of bread. So those are like the diabetes dollars. Each one is worth 15 grams, and that's my meal. And many examples are on this slide, like half a cup of fruit, half a cup of juice, half a cup of ice cream, about a cup of berries, a glass of milk. And so whether you have the little packet of jam or the slice of bread, white or wheat, they will turn in sooner or later to the same amount of blood sugar. So some people will switch to whole wheat and they'll say, I don't understand. Why is my blood sugar so high? Well, they switch from a Wonder Bread size of white to even a large slice of whole wheat. So the amount matters. Yes, whole wheat is healthier, reduced risk of stroke and heart disease, but again, number one priority is the amount of carbs. My grandfather had diabetes, and I remember my mom telling that he always swapped his bread for a ice cream. So it gives people a lot of choices. So this concept is pretty easy to understand. Sometimes when you go to the dollar store, you say, wow, I got a lot for $1. And other times like, this is all I got. So when you down in the lower hand corner here, sorry, my pointer's not showing, but the jam will turn into the same amount of blood sugar as 3 cups of popcorn. So it's like just in the dollar store. You spend $1, sometimes you get this little tiny thing, and other times you're like, wow, what a great deal. But they all cost $1. And it's cash only. There's no, oh, well, I only had 3 at lunch, so I can add those 2 I didn't eat to dinner. No, because it's amount, what can your body handle at one time? So again, the diabetes dollar is 1 diabetes dollar equals 15 grams of carbohydrate. And so all the carb serving in the store cost $1. Some are really small, 1 tablespoon of jam. Some are very large, a cup of berries, but all cost the same because they turn into the same amount of blood sugar. So if we use a common example of you get 4 carb exchanges per meal, 4 diabetes dollars to spend. So basically imagine you're starting out with those 4 plain pieces of white bread. But now you're going to spend them and exchange them in the diabetes dollar store for anything that contains enough carbs to contain 15 grams to turn into the same amount of blood sugar. And then there's one aisle in the diabetes dollar store that's free. So non-starchy vegetables, proteins and fats, and sugar-free foods, they're free because there's no need to spend an exchange on them when they're in usual amounts. I say usual because I did have a patient that ate 14 ounces of pork loin. That was it, but he still got high blood sugar. Because, yeah, protein, about half of it can turn into blood sugar. Anyway, and then you should eat healthy choices most of the time. So beef, chicken, fish, no carbs, fish or chicken, a little bit healthier. Number of kinds of fats, but healthy oils, nuts, olives. So doesn't you have to spend anything on them, but make healthy choices. So here's a common example from Samaritan. There are multiple handouts out there that do the same thing. So here we have on the left carbohydrate choices. Each serving is equal to 15 grams of carbohydrate or 1 carb choice because they turn into blood sugar. And on the other side, on the right, don't raise blood sugar when you eat them in the usual amounts. And so those are quote free. So let's look at an example. How many of you had a patient say, what? I only get half a banana? You got to be kidding me. Or I only get half of the hamburger bun? This is insane. But remember, a serving size is a standard amount. It's not the portion, the amount people put on their plate or pour in their cup. So you just acknowledge how ridiculous it is. And you say, you can have the whole banana. It will just cost you 2 diabetes dollars. You can have the whole hamburger bun. It will just cost you 2 diabetes dollars. So you have 4, you spend 2. You can have the whole cup of rice. It will just cost you how much? You go back here, you see 1/3 cup of cooked rice. So if someone has the whole cup, they can have the whole cup. It just costs them 3 of their 4 diabetes dollars. So here's the examples for the answers for your future reference. And then again, you can answer the question the other way. How much jelly do you get for 1 diabetes dollar? Well, 1 tablespoon. How much berries do you get for 1 diabetes dollar? 1 cup. How much does the green salad cost? 0. So again, here you go. 1 tablespoon, 1 cup. Turn into the exact same amount of blood sugar. Salad, don't need to count. And then this is, again, a background one for are starchy vegetables bad? A lot of people believe that. No, they're not bad. They just have enough carbohydrates to count. They have many awesome things in them. Potassium, anti-cancer. Corn actually is good for your eyes. What makes corn yellow settles in your eyes like internal blue blockers. and actually can reduce the risk of some macular degeneration and so forth. So how can I have the pie? How to cheat safely? And over time, I started just teaching people to this as an example of, here's your 4 pieces of white bread, your 4 diabetes dollars, your 4 to 5 that you need to spend. And so can I have the piece of pie? Well, life is too short to not eat pie or not have your birthday cake sometimes, because it's a matter of living and life. So life and living, we want both. So can you have the pie? Let's see. Well, the pie, the bottom crust is a carbohydrate choice, the fruit is a carbohydrate choice, and the sugar in the pie filling is a carbohydrate choice, and the top crust. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 just in the piece of pie. And they say, oh, well, I'm gonna have a sugar-free pie. Well, that just knocks it down to 3 because you still have the fruit and you have both crusts. But can I have the regular pie? Well, so there's 4, and that's what we have. But yay, free aisle. Green salad, chicken, salad dressing, sugar-free drink. Yes, that's 4. So, yep. And depending on the dressing, you have to watch dressing. Sometimes they add a little bit of sugar. But in general, you can, for 4, 4.5, 4, maybe 5 if you have a sugary dressing. Yeah, you can have the pie and eat it too. So again, background, just to kind of go over the basics for this if you need to refresh yourself in the background. Just remember, you ignore the amounts of sugar on the label. Total carb means total carb. And there's no unique effect of sugar other than it's like empty. So how do we go about figuring out these diabetes dollar stores? I lost my handout, so what has 15 grams? So this is where, this was an aha moment for me of using the analog clock to help people count carbs. Why? Because me, like most of you, I never learned my 15 times table. I remember my 12 times table, but I never learned 15 times table, and trying to teach it or do it myself, it was a numeracy challenge. Yet we're asking people with diabetes to do this numeracy challenge. But analog clock, one day, aha, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. Let's see, 15, 30, 45, 60. 1, 2, 3, 4 carb choices. It makes it super easy. We didn't learn 15 times table, but we can certainly use that. And this can also be, it's basically a number line and a circle. So you can also use it for insulin carb ratios, and we'll touch on that later. For now, let's focus on the carb counting. So again, I just usually draw this on their food label handout so they can kind of see how it works. So if something is less than 5 grams of sugar, it counts as 0 carb choices. So you don't have to count it. Also think of this as like if someone asks you about what time it is. So let's say it says 12:17. And someone asks you about what time it is. And you say, it's about 1/4 after. And it's the same way it works for carbs. So if it's 17 grams of carbohydrate in something, that is about 1 carb choice. So the one carb choice, so 15 grams equals 1 carb choice. So 15 grams plus or minus 5, so anywhere between 10 and 20, is 1 carb choice. And that's how you use it. If it's less than 5, you don't have to count it. But if it's around 10 to 20, you count it as 1 carb choice. Same thing. If the time said 12:03 and someone said about what time it is, you'd say it's about noon. And you use it the same way. And so it makes it super easy to kind of change grams on a label to carb choices. And a lot of people, they end up around, 4 to 5 carb choices, which is if you have 4 carb choices, 15, 30, 45, 60. 4 carbohydrate choices is 60 grams of carbohydrate. So let's look at this. So if it's less than 5, you count it as 0. 15 plus or minus 5 is 1 carbohydrate choice. 30 plus or minus 5 is 2 carbohydrate choices. 45 plus or minus 5 is 3 carb choices. And 60 plus or minus 5 is 4 carb choices. So if we have this, we have something with 53 grams of carbohydrate in it. And we go 15, 30, 45. So that's 3 carbohydrate choices. but it's right smack in the middle. So if it's between, it's not plus or minus 5, then it's a half. So this would make it 1, 2, 3.5 carb choices. So 53 equals 3.5 carb choices. So like a frozen dinner or something. Let's again look at the label. Here's our label again, and we look at total carbohydrates. Total carbohydrates means total. It's all included in there. So this says the serving size is 1 cup, and the label says 30 grams. Remember, the numbers on the label go with the serving size. Okay, so 30 grams. So I ate a cup. How many grams of carbohydrate did I get? 30. So how many carb choices is this? Well, 15, 30, 1, 2. So this is 2 carb choices. See, I mean, it's easy to get, you get it right away. But if I ate my portion size, what I put on my plate or put in the person, is the whole package. I ate the whole mac and cheese. So I had 2 servings. So 30 plus 30, or 30 times 2, that's 60 grams. So how many carb choices now? Well, 15, 30, 45, 60, 1, 2, 3, 4 carb choices. So if I ate the mac and cheese, I get 4 carb choices. But guess what? I could add a salad and a sugary drink, and I'm still all right with my carb choices, the amount of carbs at one time that my body can handle at one time. And here's strawberries. So 1 cup has 10 grams of carbohydrate. So 10 is it's barely into maybe about 1 carb choice. It does have a little fiber. You can subtract the fiber because it doesn't turn into blood sugar. So you can say, well, actually that's more like 7. So 10 grams of total minus the 3 grams of fiber. Okay, so I can call that half a carb choice. That's good. And what about beans? So again, this idea I just went over the strawberries is often called net carb. That's fine. But again, people don't have to do this net carb. Some people just like to do it because they feel like they're kind of getting an advantage. It's fine, but it usually doesn't make any difference unless it's 5 or more grams of carbohydrate from fiber, because that's what determines whether it's 1 carbohydrate plus or minus 5. So beans, half a cup of beans, pictured there on the right, 20 grams, 8 of those of fiber. So then we subtract that and we get 12. Well, guess what? We're still at 1 carbohydrate choice. So, okay, and again, I kind of gave this example earlier. So again, we have a frozen dinner with 53 grams of total carbohydrate. And we say, okay, 15, 30, 45, and then we go, okay, 53. So it's kind of right in smack dab in the middle. So we'll call that 15, 30, 45, 1, 2, 3.5. And that's what we call it. So after going over this, one person told me, well, I'm going to count grams then, because that sounds like more. It's like, that's fine. Some people like counting grams, and other people find it easier counting carb choices. It's really, again, whatever suits the patient makes sense to them to help them meet their goal of controlling their diabetes and having energy, because carbohydrates give us energy. So we want enough carbs for energy, but not so much we get high blood sugar. So. And here, as promised, you can use this for insulin to carb ratio dosing. So again, the analog clock is basically a number line. So if you had a 1 to 10, 1 unit of insulin for every 10 grams of carbohydrate, and you had that 53 gram carb frozen dinner, you go like, okay, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Okay, that's 5 units of insulin, because as you go, sorry, my pointer's not showing as I go around. And then what is a 1 to 15? So then you go, okay, 1, 2, 3.5. So 3.5 units of insulin would cover 53 grams of carbohydrate. So again, it can be used either way. So again, back to this point, these are trying to make, is we want to use clear communication, meaning use familiar concepts. Everybody shopped at a dollar store. Most people know how to read a clock. And someone said, well, the younger generation might not too. And I said, well, I thought about that for a moment. It's like, well, in that case, there's probably an app for that. They can use a calculator on their phone. That's just fine with me. But most people have, learned to read an analog clock. And so, but whatever works for them. Again, it's about finding tools that help people enhance their numeracy skills so they can accomplish what they need to do for their health. Understand it, make sense, and align with what their goals are. So to summarize, here's the diabetes dollar store. So someone has, an average adult, they get 4 to 5 diabetes dollars. You can represent that by 4 or 5 slices of white bread. And again, the white bread and the whole wheat bread will turn into the same amount of blood sugar, and maybe one will be slower than the others, but they will turn in the same amount of blood sugar eventually. And that's the most important thing. Again, not that the other things aren't important, but this is the most important. And the thing of jam, the packet of jam will turn in the same amount of blood sugar as that piece of white bread. So that's the diabetes dollar store idea. So whether it's that thick packet of jam or 3 cups of popcorn, same amount of blood sugar. And yes, you can have the whole hamburger bun, you just cost you $2. Diabetes dollars. And then the label reading, the key thing is look at the serving size. It's the first thing on the label, and that amount is what goes with all the rest of the numbers on the label. And the percent daily value answers your most basic question. People are like, what's a gram? What's a milligram? What's a, all these questions. Well, the daily value does the math for you and answers your most basic question. Is it a little or a lot of calcium? Well, 20% or more is high. Whether it's a quote bad or quote good nutrient, which again, as you probably gathered, I don't like those ideas of good and bad, but that's kind of how people like to think. So it's a very simple guideline, 5, 10, 20. 5% or less is low in a nutrient. If someone wants to get low sodium, they look for more foods that are 5% or less and try to avoid or limit those who are 20% or more. If someone needs more calcium, they look for foods that are 10%, 20% or more, because those are medium and high. So the daily value just doesn't really care whether it's quote good or bad, 5, 10, 20, low, medium, or high. So again, the numeracy challenge is a little or a lot, the percent daily value tells them. And again, with the food label, people shouldn't feel like they need to read the whole label. Point out the key things that are important to them for calories, for weight, saturated fat and trans, for blood cholesterol, sodium for blood pressure, total carbohydrate, and so forth. The clock solves a common numeracy challenge in diabetes. 5, 10, 20, you just use the clock. 15, 30, 45, 60, 1, 2, 3, 4 carbohydrate choices. And you can go back and forth. You can say, I have 53 grams, well that's 1, 2, 3 and a half carbohydrate choice, or I can say, I have 4 carbohydrate choices. How many grams of carbohydrate is that? Well, 4 is 15, 30, 45, 60 grams of carbohydrate. And again, the idea of balance and not aiming for perfection. And I just want to share the success story. This is, I used these concepts with this couple. She was newly diagnosed and they sent me a picture later, and this is a picture on the outside was at their first son's wedding. And the picture in the middle is at their second son's wedding. And so she had diabetes and he just went along and ate the same thing she did. Really supportive team effort there. And they counted their carbs, read every label, measured and weighed everything. It had become a way of life and is now second nature to us. Thank you for all you taught us. So our patients, they want to be healthy. Sometimes they're not ready, I recognize that. But when they're ready, it can be a real winning combination for them to get the tools they need to understand what they need to do and actually do it. So I want to applaud this couple for their success at this. So next time, we're going to learn about the sugar-frosted blood, ABCs of diabetes, the loaf in your liver, the pancreas is a tongue, the candy in your kidneys, and why do we poke our diabetes? So, and that will be some coming attractions for that. One thing I like to teach everybody is if you're searching information on the web, just add one term, on code, because that is voluntary, but websites that promise to follow health on the net standards, they're much more likely to have true information than without. 90% likely to have true health information versus 1%. So if you do that or your patient does that, you end up finding vitamin D, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, NIH, If you just do vitamin D, you might get vitamin D cures everything that ails you. Buy now. So I'll just leave my screen on this one. This is a recipe from my mom. And so this is can chili. Open, mix, heat, and eat. It's very delicious and lovely on a cold, rainy day. I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, let's go with questions. Please use the question menu on your control panel to ask any question. I got somebody having issues with downloading the presentation. So I sent you, I'm posting there my email address, and on the GoToWebinar reminder that you received, you should have my email address too. So if you have any question, any request, please send me an email and I'll be happy to help you. Now, while you guys are thinking on your questions, let's go over the housekeeping items. And please complete the survey that will show at the end. Recordings are on demand on our website, and it's opahec.org/webinars-1. And you can find upcoming webinars also on our website, opahec.org/upcoming. Email any questions to me, Carmen B, at somehealth.org. And to obtain CME, you need to log into www.eeds.com and enter the activity code. Here it is for your records. Write it down, and let's see. I got a question, and so before we finish, let's go over this question. Thank you, Brian. He's asking, 60 grams is about 2+ ounces. I would like to eat about half a pound. I think that's a comment. What should I do?
Yeah. Well, 60 grams is actually like the label amount. It's not, because carbohydrate is spread throughout food, and that's why you can get 15 grams from a small amount of a tablespoon of jam or 3 cups of popcorn. So when I say grams, that's the amount kind of hidden or spread in food. It can be very concentrated or very big. What's nice to know is if you pick things that have a lot of volume, like the popcorn, or you start your meal, if you start your meal with like a cup of tomato juice, or you start your meal with a cup of brothy soup or a salad, that is a proven way to fill your stomach, and you will end up without getting hungrier, or it fills you up to start with. So if you start your meal with one of these things, you kind of actually spoil your appetite, and helps you eat less without feeling hungrier later. So that, again, is you can have a glass of tomato juice or a brothy soup or a salad, and those things have very little or no carbohydrate. You can also start with a handful of nuts, almonds in particular, and pistachios. Almonds have been found to reduce your blood sugar after your meal. They fill you up. They're very healthy. They lower your risk of heart disease and blood pressure and everything. So those are some things that I would suggest when you have a big appetite. And you can also have snacks too. So again, remember, it's the amount you have at one time. So if you have a meal and then you're still, have your, couple hours later, have your snack of 15 to 30 grams. So that would be my answer. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And just a reminder, next week we will have our second part on Thursday, November 12th, same time, same day, next week. And check our website, again, opahec.org. hec.org/upcoming. And of course, I will be emailing everybody about the upcoming webinar, and so you can register. Another easy way to remember is bit.ly OPAHEC Diabetes 2. And with that, and I don't see any other questions. I see comments that are saying that thank you. All the information has been helpful. I love the clock idea.
Good.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your time with us.
Oh, thank you.
And just let's finally, I just want to reiterate once more, next week we'll be hosting the second part of today's webinar. Please complete the brief survey that will appear as soon as the webinar ends. And this would be it. You have now completed the webinar and you may disconnect. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate your time and attendance.
See you next week.
Yeah, hope to see you next week. Enjoy the can chili.